less than a couple hours, so walk us through what exactly happened.
Yeah, this will kickstart the process about whether former President Donald Trump will be charged with inciting an insurrection that led to the deadly riot here on Capitol Hill on January 6th. This article will be marched over from the House to the Senate. The House impeachment managers who will prosecute the case in the Senate will read aloud the text of that very brief one article charging the former president with inciting the insurrection. And then afterwards, tomorrow will be the day in which the senators who act as jurors will be sworn in. Now, presiding over this case will be Patrick Leahy, who's the presiding officer of the Senate. He's the Senate pro tem, the most senior member, not Chief Justice John Roberts, who presided over the 2020 trial, because this is not involving a sitting president, but a former president. And that's given rise to a number of concerns, particularly from Republicans, about whether this is constitutional or not to try a former president. But today, the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer took to the Senate floor and pushed back on that criticism and said going after former President Trump is within the bounds of the Constitution.
The theory that the Senate can't try former officials would amount to a constitutional get-out-of-jail-free card for any president who commits an impeachable offense. There seems to be some hope that Republicans could oppose the former president's impeachment on process grounds rather than grappling with his actual awful conduct. Let me be very clear. This is not going to fly. The trial is going to happen. It is certainly and clearly constitutional. And if the former president is convicted, there will be a vote to disqualify him from future office.
And that is going to be a central argument that House Democratic impeachment managers will make on the Senate floor when it comes time to argue the case. The arguments themselves won't be heard in public until the week of February 8th. That's when they plan to begin those opening arguments. For the next 2 weeks, there will be briefs that will be filed on both sides laying out why they believe this is constitutional, why the president, in the views of Democrats, believe that he needs to be convicted, and the defense will lay out its case about why this should be thrown out. Now, overall, the question remains, too, how far will Democrats go? Will they bring in witnesses who may lay out more of Donald Trump's thinking at the time in which he spoke to that rally on January 6th and to the run-up of that rally, and what he was doing behind the scenes to subvert the will of voters who elected Joe Biden? That will be a question. Will they bring in witnesses? I just asked Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, whether or not he believes there should be witnesses. He said that has not been decided yet. So that is one key question. Other questions remain, too, about the length of this trial. But Wolf, in talking to Democrats, they believe that this trial will not go as long as the 2020 trial when Donald Trump was charged with abuse of power and obstructing Congress. They believe this trial will be less than 21 days. Uncertain how long it could go, but it could eat up a chunk of February at a key time when Joe Biden is trying to get his nominees confirmed and they're trying to move on a COVID relief package. And Wolf, overall question, too, will 17 Republican senators break ranks, join with 50 Democrats, and convict Donald Trump? At the moment, that appears increasingly unlikely.
You need a two-thirds majority to convict. So they'll deliver the article of impeachment to the Senate tonight. The trial won't start till the week of February 8th. But tomorrow afternoon, there's also some related activity. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's when the senators themselves will take their oaths to be jurors, essentially, in this proceeding. And there will also be a summons that will be sent to the president and his team. And then after that, the ceremonial aspects will be done. And that's when they'll start to lay out specific arguments. And briefs will be delivered to the Senate, which is acting as a court here. And then those arguments will occur on February 8th. So about 2 weeks, things will be quiet for a little while as the Senate tries to move on to other parts of the agenda and see if they can get bipartisan support to confirm some of Joe Biden's nominees.
Yeah, those 100 senators are supposed to be jurors in this trial. Art Mono, thank you very, very much.
Preborn children inherently possess this right to life, too. Noem unveiling the proposal during her State of the State address earlier this month and actually introduced the bill to the legislature today. South Dakota health officials are confirming 32 new COVID-19 cases today. Active cases continue to fall. Right now, the state reports just under 3,700 cases, the lowest since late September. The number of people currently hospitalized by the disease fell by 1 to 161. No new deaths to tell you about, the state's total remaining at 1,705. Almost 60,000 South Dakotans have now received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. In Minnesota today, Governor Tim Walz announcing changes in the sign-up process for a community vaccine program after heavy website traffic crashed the registration site. State officials have shifted to a lottery, which widens the registration window to 24 hours for Minnesotans over 65 to pre-register to be randomly chosen for an appointment. The state will also hold a mass vaccination event for teachers, school staff, and child care workers in the metro area at the XL Energy Center in St. Paul. More than 67,000 people have received both COVID vaccine doses. In Iowa, just under 178,000 vaccine doses have been administered. State officials have canceled the annual count of South Dakota's unsheltered homeless population because of the coronavirus pandemic. The count is usually done on the last Tuesday of January. Volunteers of America Regional Homeless Services says that the Department of Housing and Urban Development made that decision not to do the count this year because of the pandemic, lack of personal protection equipment, and not enough volunteers. The agency adds the count of homeless people in shelters will still take place Tuesday. Officials are concerned about how the decision will impact the level of federal funding. Rotarians hosted the first SIOUX 52 mentoring moment this afternoon to continue spreading the initiative. Organizers, including Mayor Paul Tenhaken, explained their objective for recruiting 5,200 mentors by 2026 and how to create a culture of mentoring in businesses. Other speakers stressed the significance of showing up for mentees.
All you have to really do is show up. You don't have to prepare anything, you don't have to buy anything, you don't have to do anything but be there. And we want people to take that time just to be there.
Last year, more than 250 individuals signed up to mentor, and 30 businesses and organizations signed on to be partners. To learn more about how to get involved with SIOUX 52, just head on over to your Dakota News Now app and search mentoring. The Great Plains Zoo cares for more than 1,000 animals from around the world, including 21-year-old Charles the black bear. To make things a bit more comfortable for Charles, the zoo plans to renovate the black bear exhibit with a little help from a local business. Scott Ingen has details here for.
Charles the black bear has called the Great Plains Zoo home for years. Now the exhibit he lives in is in need of a makeover.
As he gets older, of course, there's geriatric needs that do present themselves, so we're just looking to make it a little bit more accommodating to meet those geriatric needs.
While not as large as some past projects, I'm told the revamp is expected to make a big difference.
And so I'm very excited because this would be modernizing one of our older exhibits, making it more aesthetically pleasing for the visitors, but also more enriching for the animals that are in our care.
To help out, the Barrel House is donating 10% of its sales Monday to the cause.
We love to be involved with the community, especially when it has to do with kids. When you think zoo, you think of taking your kids to the zoo.
In addition, Hungry Hearts will match the total amount raised. Hungry Hearts is a separate program the Barrel House is a part of, which ensures children have a hot school lunch.
We're just grateful that we're in the opportunity to give back to the community, and we want to see the Great Plains Zoo continue to grow.
Frankly, our zoo would not function without the community support we have for it, so I just want to say thank you to everyone who supports their local zoo.
In Sioux Falls, Scott Ingen, Dakota News Now.
And you still have time to get involved. The Barrel House's dining room is open until 10 o'clock tonight, where takeout and online sales will also count towards the donation. One of the largest farm shows in southeast South Dakota kicks off this week, the 68th Sioux Empire Livestock Show, beginning tomorrow at the W.H. Line Fairgrounds in Sioux Falls. The annual event will be held in the Expo Center, which is also going to be sponsored by the Agribusiness Division of the Greater Sioux Falls Chamber of Commerce. The farm show will run through January and Saturday and is free and open to the public. A programming note here on Dakota News Now. This weekend we are featuring a documentary on Willie O'Ree. He's the descendant of slaves, changed hockey forever in 1958, where you can catch this 1-hour documentary at Sunday at 4 o'clock over on KSFY. Still ahead here at 4 o'clock, this drugstore chain just hit a milestone today in its effort to vaccinate nursing home facilities across the country. But how close is the chain to its inoculation goal? More on this coming up. Hey, Tyler.
Hey there, Sam. We're still tracking some light snowfall moving through parts of the area this afternoon. I'll let you know how much longer we'll be dealing with that snowfall coming up in your first alert forecast.
And for the first time in nearly 40 years, you won't see any ads from this beer maker during this year's Super Bowl. We'll tell you why when we return.
The First Alert Weather Team, only on Dakota.
Serious side effects like low blood calcium.
You heard them chanting, "Hang my pants." That's right. That's actually right, Nicole. And, you know, it wasn't just chanting, let's hang Mike Pence. They literally had a small scaffolding with a noose outside. And speaking of chilling, when Mike Pence was quickly escorted rapidly by a Secret Service detail to a hideaway office, when protesters / rioters broke through the actual first glass and door and breached the Capitol. When he was taken there, he was in a northwest corner of the building overlooking this area with the noose. I think it's so important to emphasize a point that Dan made, which is this idea of a pattern. Keep in mind that the Pence sort of scold that Trump gives publicly, like, Trump doesn't filter. President Trump tells you exactly what he wants. He gives you his instructions. It may be a little bit nuanced, but he's telling you what he wants. And he was telling Pence what he wanted publicly, privately. He was telling everybody around Pence what he wanted. But there's a larger pattern of desperation on the part of Donald Trump. Remember, from November 3rd until January 6th, the only thing Donald Trump was doing, minus some other calls that are unrelated, the only thing that he was doing was trying to undermine this election and get it tossed. Mm-hmm. He tried through the court. He lost 92 times. He tried through pressuring different state officials and legislators to come to the White House and reject and void those votes. He tried it most recently around the time of January 2nd to remove the acting attorney general, who was not in agreement, just as his previous attorney general, Bill Barr, who walked out the door sort of throwing up his hands saying, I'm not dealing with this anymore. Donald Trump tried to remove the next acting attorney general, who would not go down this road with him, avoiding the election. And, you know, Donald Trump somehow finds an enabler. He always is able to find somebody, but he reaches pretty far down when he reaches for Jeffrey Clark to help him. He reaches pretty far down when he calls an investigator in the Georgia State Election Board to harangue her about her vote count. And he just kept doing this, and finally his coup de grace was the appearance he, Rudy Giuliani, and Don Jr. Trump made at the Ellipse, where they talked about taking the fight to the Capitol.
You know, you mentioned this DOJ story, and I wonder, Carol, I have a few just emotional reactions. I mean, as you said, Bill Barr left, and to me it's in the vein of how bad was Donald Trump. He was so bad, Bill Barr didn't want to stay till the end. But on the other occasion, Bill Barr wants to walk out the door with some legacy intact, some semblance of, well, there was a bridge too far and it was, you know, fraudulently going along with Trump's claims. But he obviously left his deputy and the department out to dry. I mean, there was an insurrection inside the Justice Department, and I wonder what the state of mind is of the folks that were sort of abandoned by Barr in the final days, a coup plotted against then acting Attorney General Jeff Rosen by this, and it's always some unsuspecting, bespeckled policy guy that turns out to be the coup plotter. But what was sort of the damage done by that act at DOJ?
Well, you never want an attorney general who can get the president to listen to you to leave. But I do believe that Bill Barr's goal there was, I'm not going to have a shouting match with the president through Christmas and January about a fraudulent election when none of my U.S. attorneys see any fraud. I mean, the fraud that might have existed is so de minimis. I'm not going to get into that. I'm going to take my leave. But I do believe genuinely, Nicole, that the former attorney general also believed that these people were the placeholders, that maybe they couldn't stand up to Donald Trump, but they would at least be loyal to his view on this issue of fraud and how bogus it all was. I also have to say, you know, Bill Barr, Pat Cipollone, so many people who've been so loyal to the president and helping him achieve his particular agenda, even in the face of pretty brutal criticism from other Republicans that they're close to. For them to both stand up and say, one, I'm out of here, and the second, I'm going to resign if you keep doing this, it's pretty amazing. And it tells you how sort of bonkers things have got when the president reached, I would guess, the 7th desperate attempt.
Yeah, I mean, Eugene, to Carol's point, we're just beginning to learn just how bad it really was. And I say this as someone who is inside government. Whatever great reporters like Carol and yourself learn, when it's bad, it's worse. And I want to show you something that Chuck Schumer said in an interview he just recorded with my colleague Rachel Maddow that'll air tonight about the importance of examining this period. Let's watch. We'll talk about it on the other side.
But we still can look back, and we have to. You can't sweep some of these egregious things under the rug. Plain and simple. Trump was, you know, his act on the 6th was the most despicable thing any president has ever done. And he is the worst president ever. And you cannot just, let's move on. You got to look back.
Eugene, Democrats, and Garrett Haake reported in the last hour that the House impeachment managers are lined up doing interviews. There is a public relations aspect to this impeachment that I think exceeds the last one for different reasons. It's a different point in time. It's a different result that a conviction would have. But what do you make of efforts to just marshal and focus in on Trump's incitement of the insurrection and the importance of having that be behavior for which a president is held accountable?
Well, if there's not going to be accountability for this, then what in the world do you ever hold a president accountable for? You called it in the introduction to the speech, you called it a coup plot, and that's exactly what it was. It was an attempted coup. Over a period of a couple of months, the president tried through any means necessary to overthrow the result of a free and fair election that he lost. And he tried to do it, you know, time and time again in different ways, and this didn't work, and he tried that, and tried state, and he had, you know, his Star Wars bar scene of lawyers file lawsuit after lawsuit that got thrown out, you know, and laughed out of court, basically. I mean, this is astounding, and this is, you know, you can laugh at it almost because in part it was comic, but this is as serious as it gets. We're talking about the continuation of our democracy. We're talking about a president who tried to interrupt and to essentially wreck our democracy and cling to power in the most egregious and illegal and anti-democratic way you can imagine. He summoned the mob to Washington that day. He told them on his Twitter feed, it's going to be wild. He whipped them into a frenzy and then sent them off to the Capitol. You don't have to, you know, draw the leaps of imagination to see what was going to happen. And then, as Dan Goldman said, during the insurrection itself, he seemed to not particularly care much about trying to stop it. So, look, if there's not accountability for this, then what kind of democracy do we have? And so this just has to happen. This trial has to happen. And Republicans are going to have to listen to this evidence. There's going to be more and more evidence. And then they're going to have to vote their conscience. And we'll see if they have a conscience.
Well, I mean, whatever president followed Trump was going to be boring. It's like following Guns N' Roses. I'm sorry. Like, people are going to go to the bar and they're going to go to the bathroom. And right now, you can tell the media's already bored of Joe, and they're trying to make the mundane scintillating, like the bagels and the dogs and the ice cream and stuff like that. But that only works if it's a rock star president, like a celebrity like Donald Trump or like the first black president. That doesn't work with Joe Biden. You can sandwich J-Lo and Lady Gaga in between Joe, but it's still a sleepy sandwich. There's no getting around that. You can't make this guy interesting. So they can't cover him if it's a scandal because they're on his side. They helped get him elected. And they can't cover personality because there is no personality with the Biden administration. So they're having to cover policy. And that spells doom for Joe Biden because his policies are dumb and they're bad. So the only thing they're going to have to do, if he bombs someone, then they'll pick up and start covering something sexy.
Yeah, there you go. You know, Dana, there are two things that they're giving him a pass, it seems, this week. Remember when he said he had a solution for the pandemic, and now he admits there's nothing we can do? And then he just did a travel ban for people from South Africa, which would strike the media as xenophobic if it were someone else doing it.
So, yeah, so Joe Biden sounds boring, but his policies are actually kind of extreme if you go through the executive orders.
Yeah.
President Trump's personality was extreme, but his policies were actually, in some cases, pretty, leaning right, conventional. And so I always thought that
is genius. That comparison, Dana, is genius.
Really? Or are you making fun of me?
No. What you just did was you showed the inverse, which I hadn't thought of, is that like Biden's boring but extreme, and Trump was extreme but actually kind of benign.
And so the two examples I would give, Dagan already mentioned the pipeline, but there's two others in these executive orders that really affect people at home. One of them is ending the price freeze on insulin that President Trump had put into place, and with no explanation. It's like, I'm signing this here. And then the other one is about what will happen to girls' sports all across America. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
So reporters, I do think that, one, it's not boring. Being at the White House is not boring. But they also focus way too much on the White House itself and not enough on the entire federal government. That is where a lot of big stories are, and they get buried.
That is true. All right. Up ahead, Senator Josh Hawley tearing into cancel culture and warning it could be coming for all of us if we don't stop now.
I never made. So I know that someone out there or someone inside was creating a parallel set of data.
There was a considerable amount of mixed messaging about what needed to be done from the top down, and that really cost us dearly.
President Biden is saying that he thinks by the spring, everybody who wants a vaccine in this country will be able to get one. He calls it a logistical challenge unlike anything ever seen, but says it is doable. However, Wolf, the darkest hour comes before the dawn. January this month is projected to be the deadliest month of this pandemic so far.
Wolf, first day of spring, what is March 21st? Let's hope that happens. Nick Watt in LA for us, thank you. Let's get some more on all of this. Former CDC Acting Director Dr. Richard Besser is joining us. Dr. Besser, thank you so much for joining us. The new CDC Director, who's just taken over the position that you once held, says, and I'm quoting her now, "I can't tell you how much vaccine we have." That's a direct quote. How quickly should we expect the new administration to get their arms around this crisis and improve vaccine distribution?
Well, that's a good question. I couldn't imagine what it would be like coming in and not having that critical piece of information. As states around the nation are planning to administer vaccines, not knowing for certain how many doses are going to be coming each week, that makes it really hard to figure out, well, how many doses do you need to make sure you have for second doses versus first doses? It's a critical piece of information to have, to be able to predict how many people can you vaccinate and how quickly. It's a starting block that they just don't have yet.
Yeah, they need that information. They need it right away. The White House also says it's working to ensure there is enough supply for Americans to get their second doses on time, either 3 weeks or 4 weeks, depending on the vaccine. There is some confusion about when people should go back for a second dose, and the CDC has updated its guidance. What do Americans need to understand about the 2 doses that are required?
Well, you need to understand that both doses are required in order to get the full protection. I think you also need to understand that while we all want to get vaccinated, there are people in our country who are at greater risk. And as we think about what people need to do to protect themselves and get this under control, it's wearing masks, it's social distancing, it's washing our hands, but it's also waiting our turn and making sure that there's enough vaccine for essential workers, those people who are keeping society going. I look forward to the day when I'm called to get vaccinated, but I would not want to get vaccinated ahead of someone who is working in the grocery store, or someone who's running our transit system. We have to be patient and recognize there's not enough vaccine right now. We knew that coming into this, but eventually there will be enough vaccine for everyone in America.
The CDC is also reviewing new data that suggests, Dr. Besser, that the coronavirus variant identified in the UK, for example, could be even more deadly. Modeling shows this new variant could become the predominant variant actually in the United States by March. What precautions do Americans need to be taking now?
Well, I think it reinforces the importance of flattening the curve, that phrase that we used back in the spring. The more the virus can transmit, the more those can reduce the impact of.
And it's anyone's game.
50% of the vaccines that they have been given in Florida. So clearly they have a good deal of the vaccine. That supply will need to continue to increase as they are able to effectively reach people across the state. But part of the challenge, as we were just talking about, is not just having the supply, that's pivotal, but also having vaccinators and having vaccine distribution places and doing it in a way that's reaching people where they are and meeting local communities. And the president's going to be focused on that in a bipartisan manner, regardless of what any elected official may have to say. Go ahead all the way in the back, all the way in the back.
Hi.
And then we'll come to you, sir. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. In an executive order that the president signed last week, he also suspended a Trump administration executive order that was particularly aimed at keeping foreign countries, specifically China, from interfering in the U.S. power grid. But he suspended that for 90 days in that executive order last week. Given what you said about China today, why did he do that, especially related to something so critical to our national security as the power grid?
I think the president's view on our relationship with China, I tried to do my best to convey to all of you. I'll have to check on that specific piece and we'll circle back with you directly. Go ahead.
Thank you. The administration said that the Remain in Mexico policy from the prior administration would not be enforced anymore, but there are thousands of people who are stuck now as a result of that policy, and the administration has not said what you will do with them and how to process these migrants. What is the answer to that?
In terms of migrants at the border? Well,
who are stuck as a result of Remain in Mexico. There are many thousands of people.
Well, I think there's a couple of steps that we're working to convey and convey more effectively to people directly living in many of the countries who have large populations who are coming to the border. One is that this is not the right time to come. We have proposed a number of policies that we are working to implement, including a pause on deportations. As you know, for people who are in the United States, that is something the Department of Homeland Security would be working to implement. We've also proposed an immigration bill, something the president put forward on day one. And we've also proposed funding to help address the circumstances and the challenging conditions that are on the ground in a number of these countries.
I'm talking about those people who are in limbo at the moment, not discouraging new people from coming and not applying it to new people, but those people who are specifically turned away by the Trump administration.
I'd send you to the Department of Homeland Security on that for a more specific assessment.
For a second question, I just wanted to press you a little harder. You said earlier that the president had been speaking with members of the Senate, but you wouldn't say who they were and anything about those conversations because they were private. I mean, they were presumably discussing the people's business. Is that a matter, why should those be private? Why not be more revealing of who the president is speaking with that is in the government?
Well, what I said is that the president is speaking with Democrats and Republicans, as are a number of senior officials from the current White House, and we'll continue to do that. And what I meant was those conversations, getting their feedback about what they think about bills and legislation, how they feel about the COVID package that the president put forward, where they have concerns, where they have agreement, that some of those conversations are private. They can speak publicly about their conversations, of course, as many of them have done. But what I was confirming is that he personally is involved and will continue to be involved in moving this package forward.
this for 4 years now. When the President of the United States defends the Russians, whether it's on the 2016 presidential hack or any of the other misbehavior that Putin engaged in, and then Putin knows that the President of the United States is going to actually defend him. The message to Russia, of course, is you can do whatever you want. And of course, they've done whatever they wanted. They've continued to kill dissidents. They've continued to try to poison Navalny. They attacked us with a remarkable cybersecurity hack. Just having the president call out the Russians is important. What's even more important, of course, is actions, right? And I am going to be standing by and watching very closely with the new Biden administration to see what they actually do to respond to the cybersecurity hack. Because again, at the end of the day, words are good, but for a guy like Vladimir Putin, it is actions and pain inflicted that will change behavior.
Congressman Jim Himes, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. When we come back, the $1.3 billion lawsuit against Rudy Giuliani's lies about Dominion and election fraud. That's next.
And there is now, they've been co-opted by the left and co-opted by government. They're willing to shut down not just speech, but an entire company because conservatives posted their thoughts there. And I don't know where we go with this, but, you know, if you bought a MAGA hat on Amazon, will they eventually come after you too?
Yeah, Juan, 20 years ago, if you were against the Iraq War, or if you were for gay marriage or for legalizing marijuana, people got canceled for that kind of stuff. A lot of liberals got canceled for speaking out against those types of things. Now, 20 years later, you guys are leading the charge. How do you square that?
Well, I don't think, you know, I find this curious. He is on the front page of a widely read newspaper in the biggest city in America, New York City, complaining about cancel culture. Wait a minute, I thought he was being canceled. Look, I'm a big believer, Jesse, in capitalism. And if a private company decides it doesn't want to do business with an individual, well, it seems to me like that's a private business decision. And it's not about cancel culture. It's not about government censorship. It's a business decision. And you know, Josh Hawley, let's tell people the story here. Josh Hawley made a huge mistake. He misread the politics of certifying the election. He lost in the Senate. I think it was like 93-7. And then, you know, people said, there's Josh Hawley outside, you know, giving the power sign, throwing up his fist to people who are invading the Capitol, and so he's not so popular with a lot of fellow Republicans. I think the truth is now he's just trying to change the subject to cancel culture to get away from people talking about his bad politics. And I don't think I don't think he's going to get a pass on this from anybody who takes a second to look at the whole story.
Yeah, but you can't lose your speech because you happen to have a wrong opinion. Wait a second. Juan, didn't you write a book about this? What was it called?
Yes, muzzled. But that's not this is what I'm saying, Greg. This guy, it was not being muzzled if he's on the front page of the New York Post complaining. And by the way,
they're taking his book deal away. They're not donating to him anymore.
You did the same thing. You wrote a book about being muzzled, yet you wrote a book. You're criticizing him for the same thing you did.
Nobody. Greg, if you put me on the front page of the paper every day, I don't know, how is that? I had a different situation. I've been fired muzzled, so I guess a little harsher in my way.
All right. All right, well, Juan just said he's a big believer in capitalism, and these companies can do whatever they want. And I'm going to remember you said that the next time when you guys on the left start cracking down on companies, Juan, all right? Like the pipeline, okay? All right. Coming up, liberal city chaos, a mob viciously beating a man in broad daylight. Plus a new warning that violence could get worse under President Biden.
The country who are thinking about joining the military and thinking about what they can do to contribute.
Again, from either management or from the defendant.
Restoring the situation that existed before with transgender personnel, if qualified in every other way, can serve
that are in government in the United States military.
President Biden deferring questions after signing, but noted that previous secretaries and commanders have supported this position. Governor Kristi Noem introducing a bill that would ban abortions based on a Down syndrome diagnosis. The governor citing research that estimates 2 out of every 3 Down syndrome pregnancies in the United States ends in an abortion. Governor Noem said that she looks forward to the day when the Supreme Court, quote, recognizes that all preborn children inherently possess this right to life too. Noem unveiling the proposal during her State of the State address earlier this month and actually introducing the bill to the legislature today. South Dakota health officials confirming 32 new COVID-19 cases.
Because we defend all Americans. But as Secretary Austin said in his statement, it's also about having enough talent, the right talent, to fill out the ranks. And why would we rob ourselves? Why would we deprive ourselves of the talent of so many Americans based on something like gender identity? It just is not in keeping with our core values and what we represent. And so it's a historic day for the Pentagon in yet another way today.
As you know, the former President Trump, he said this was not what the military wanted. It was uncomfortable for the military. You know the military. You served in the Navy for a long time. Give us the reaction from the men and women in the military to this decision today by the President.
Well, you know, what's interesting is that there hasn't been some rousing reaction to this, Wolf. I think, you know, this was a policy that was in place in 2016 during the Obama administration that had been fully staffed and vetted, and the chiefs of all the services said they had seen no decrease in military readiness because of allowing transgender people to serve in the military. And so we're kind of going back to that old policy. That's the new policy now made old, and I just don't think you're going to see much of a reaction other than the support that we have already seen and heard from service members all throughout the country that they believe this is the right thing.
So encouraging. The acting Army Secretary today commented on the ongoing threats here in the nation's capital, saying there are concerns that, in his words, malicious actors could use lawful protests to create trouble. About 7,000 National Guard troops will stay here in Washington through mid-March, John. But have lessons been learned since the Capitol riot? Give us the latest.
Oh, of course lessons have been learned. I mean, this is not a mission that our National Guard typically performs. Obviously, they support civil authorities and missions throughout the country. That's typical for them, and they've had a very busy year. But this is a unique mission, so I think, yes, they're clearly learning from this. It has put them in some ways, a very difficult spot, sort of in between defense of the Capitol and the government and the institution and the people that those institutions serve. But they're doing an amazing job. They really are. They were sucked out of their jobs and away from their families on very short notice, and they're out there in the cold, making sure that the business of this government can go on safely. So I think we are learning a lot of lessons. And I think we'll build on that going forward. But mostly we want to make sure that while we keep the institution of government going safely, that we get them back to their jobs and back to their homes just as soon as practical. And many of them will be leaving very, very soon.
Very quickly, have you gotten any explanation why those National Guard troops, hundreds if not thousands, were booted from the Capitol, forced to go to some underground garage, breathe in exhaust fumes, very few bathrooms? It was a horrible decision. I don't know who made it, but is there an explanation why that occurred? The men and women of the National Guard should not be forced to do that.
No, they shouldn't. And you saw that even President Biden was very clear and open about his regrets for what happened to them, as many members of Congress were too. I think it was a miscommunication between the Capitol Police and the National Guard. It was temporary. They weren't actually there for that long, but it should never have happened, clearly. And I think everybody has learned a lesson from that as well. You saw just recently the Capitol Police and the National Guard for D.C. put out a joint statement about their appreciation for one another and the respect that they have for both institutions. So we obviously learned a lesson from that.
The point is, Rudy's wrong. And Bill Barr knew Rudy was wrong, which was why he left. The next AG knew Rudy was wrong, which is why he stood up to the coup plotter there. 92 judges knew Rudy was wrong, which is why all these voter fraud cases went nowhere. What do you think happens to Rudy?
So this whole thing brings to mind the phrase, fake it until you make it. And that's usually used to describe people trying to, break through in very difficult industries or hucksters or such. In this case, my thinking is Rudy has been telling these fabulous tales, these lies about Dominion, and he keeps going further and further down the rabbit hole. And at some point he assumes that his friends in power will bail him out. It could have been in the form of a pardon by Donald Trump. The problem is his friends in power are no longer in power. And so what becomes of this, who knows? But he, unlike everyone else, seems to be doubling down on the lie, saying, well, look, I'll just turn and use this as part of discovery in some court case. Well, you know, it takes money to get into court. It takes legal fees to fight a corporation like Dominion. Right. At some point, he's going to be drained of his resources, and or he's going to get in real legal trouble. So he's faking it, and he's faking it. He might not make it.
Sam Stein, we will pick this up later this week with a lawyer in tow, because I too want to understand exactly where all the exposure is. The lies they're on tape, they're on his Twitter feed. They've been disproven over and over and over again, and we'll stay on this. Thanks for spending some time with us. We are right now waiting for the House of Representatives to send the single article of impeachment against Donald Trump to the United States Senate. We'll continue to cover that breaking story. But up next for us here, the coronavirus pandemic and the life and death race between delivering the vaccines and the emergence of dangerous new variants of the virus. That's next.
When you're a small business owner,
contrasted to the fact that it was at a near 20, even 30-year low across the country, Dana. You know, it strikes me that in cities like Pittsburgh right now, I just read, you say the homicide is up 40%, but that's from a year ago when it was at the lowest rate in more than 20 years. So what happened? So I just don't think, I think there's lots of context here. Jesse touched on some of it in terms of the pandemic and obviously higher levels of unemployment right now, and a lot of it connected to, as Jesse suggested, drug trade and all that. But I'm just saying, if we are going to be honest with the viewer here, you got to say we are still at near a historic low all time in terms of crime, even homicide in this country. But it makes me think that what this is about is going after cities and saying, oh, those are liberal bastions, and they're liberal. I mean, that's a Trump-style attack that he used to rally his base, but I'm not sure it's based in reality.
Okay, but Greg, the numbers are the numbers, and if crime is going up, that's not a good thing. We had figured out how to get crime down, and now it's spiking all across. And in the Northwest, you have these anarchists who are allowed to basically keep going for months.
I mean, this is not a hard topic to argue about. The data is undeniable. The murder increases have doubled in some cities. If you're looking at Milwaukee, or an 80% increase in Louisville. I think it's doubled in Milwaukee, 80% in Louisville. 74% in Seattle, 72% in Minneapolis, 62% in New Orleans, 58% in Atlanta. That's increases in murder. That's not a crime wave. That's a crime monsoon. There were 55 children killed in Chicago last year. There's a weird, grim hypocrisy behind this. If you bring this stuff up and you claim that you're concerned about it, they will say, come on, it's gang crime, meaning they're just killing each other. And if you think it's a big story, well, then you're racist or you're a Trumper. But isn't a person who's dismissing this as something that is not a big deal because it's gang crime the actual bigot? I think that the solution here is the Dems need to live under the conditions that they create, because clearly they don't mind the conditions that they create for others. And that has always been the flaw here, that there are people who are able to vote in policies that only harm other people. Basically, all liberals and Democrats prefer the crime stats in Republican City, yet they just prefer the power of being a Democrat in the crappy cities. And yeah, it is a city problem, because wherever there's a Democrat mayor, there's a hell of a lot of crime. But at least all these victims, all these dead people, they're mostly peaceful.
Dagan, any last thoughts for you? I was going to ask you about the economy in these cities, but I'll give you a wide open range to comment.
The people, the leaders who have made these decisions that put residents in harm's way, the leaders who stood by and allowed folks' businesses to be destroyed, their livelihoods decimated, the decisions that have caused this violence and death, they're safe and sound. They're secure. It's the people who are having to go to work every day, who have no way of defending themselves, who have to stand back and listen to, say, Mayor Jenny Durkin issue a statement when the city is burning.
All right, up next, as you may have noticed, we disagree from time to time on this show. And
heavier snow is really taking place. As much as 1 to 2 inches of new snowfall an hour occurring in this part of Iowa. We're going to be looking at that sticking around through tonight. That's also, or no surprise, those winter storm warnings are in effect tonight. Clay and Union counties in South Dakota under that winter weather advisory. Most of us kind of escaping that, and we're not going to be really looking at anything as far as travel hazards go for tonight. That includes in and around Sioux Falls. Temperature-wise, low to mid-teens, much colder this afternoon. Further west, we're barely at 20 degrees. Everybody.
Police say places like gyms and daycares are quick and easy targets for suspects. If you were a victim of such a theft, you should contact the police.
Lawmakers up here are discussing how to best regulate voter-approved marijuana use in the state, but one thing is clear, they don't want it used in motor vehicles. House Bill 1061 would make use of marijuana in a motor vehicle a misdemeanor. The draft legislation covers use of any part of the marijuana plant as well as any derivative or resin from marijuana.
Finally, the fifth thing, the House is set to bring impeachment articles against Donald Trump for the Senate trial. House Democrats who are prosecuting the case will block the charge of incitement of insurrection to the Senate tonight. The trial is set to begin in 2 weeks.
One last check of the weather with meteorologist Adam Rudd. Adam.
It'll be a cold night tonight, lows in the single digits with sub-zero wind chills, and we don't see too much improvement on the thermometer as we go into Tuesday.
Thanks for joining us.
Have a good night.
Question tonight, where are the vaccines? The federal government doesn't know how many doses are available, as drug makers say they're delivering at least 12 million a week. So why are some states running out? Tonight, President Biden makes a bold promise, saying every American who wants a vaccine should be able to get one by the spring, and that the U.S. could give 1.5 million doses a day.
It's going to be a logistical challenge that exceeds anything we've ever tried.
New travel ban prohibiting foreign travelers from Brazil, Britain, Ireland, South Africa, and 26 European countries from entering the U.S., as a new variant is found here in America. Impeachment trial begins. The House delivers the article of impeachment to the Senate, where 100 senators become the judge and jury. Undoing the Trump legacy. As the new defense secretary is sworn in, President Biden reverses the ban on transgender people serving in the military. Getting back to school. The national plan to get students back in the classroom as teachers in Chicago vote to keep remote learning. And why a shocking rise in student suicides led one city to reopen its doors. Triple storm threat. Nearly 110 million Americans brace for winter weather. Protests turn violent. Tacoma, Washington on edge tonight. In the doghouse, the president's beloved German shepherds arrive at the White House. Near perfect performance. The UCLA gymnast's jaw-dropping floor routine. And a Super Bowl matchup for the ages as the GOAT takes on the kid.
This is the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell, reporting from the nation's capital.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. We're going to begin with some news that is just coming in tonight. The first case of a highly contagious new variant of the coronavirus from Brazil has been discovered right here in the U.S. A dangerous development, not only because it spreads faster than the virus that's already here, but because scientists worry that vaccines may not be as effective at stopping new strains of this virus. Now, the discovery of the new case comes at the same time concerns are growing nationwide about a shortage of vaccine doses. From coast to coast, tonight, states say they are canceling appointments they've made to give people shots and are pulling back on plans to open mass vaccination sites because they don't have enough doses to give out. Well, meantime, the White House and the CDC say they still don't know exactly how many vaccine doses the U.S. government has available to send the states. And they're blaming the confusion on the Trump administration, saying it didn't provide the new president or his team with detailed information about the government stockpile. Now, all of that is leading to finger-pointing and frustration as hundreds of millions of Americans wait for their shots. President Biden told
former president to face an impeachment trial after leaving office. We remember that image, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi signing the document hours after the House voted to impeach. You'll also remember 10 Republicans in the House joining the Democrats, the House managers right there with Speaker Pelosi, who will now make their case against the former president in the trial. They're expected to focus their case on what members of Congress lived through and witnessed themselves. Millions of Americans watching, too, the storming of the Capitol that turned deadly. Members of Congress rushed to safety. And they will point to the president's words at that rally that came just before the storming of the Capitol and what he repeatedly claimed about the election for weeks leading up to the riots. Tomorrow, the senators will be sworn in as jurors. We have already reported here Senate leaders have agreed to delay the actual start of the trial. And this time, Chief Justice John Roberts will not preside over the trial. So tonight, who will, and where do things stand among Republicans? Democrats would need 17 Republicans to join them to convict. ABC's Rachel Scott on the Hill tonight, leading us off.
Tonight, just moments away from history. The House preparing to deliver that article of impeachment to the Senate, setting the stage for the second impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump. It has been just 19 days since that deadly mob of Trump supporters stormed the Capitol, egged on by the president himself in a desperate effort to overturn the election.
If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. We're going to walk down and I'll be there with you.
Rioters making it clear they were following the orders from their leader. Capitol police officers crushed in the throng, screaming for help. Democrats say that since then, the case against Trump has only grown stronger.
He has not demonstrated remorse. He has not even acknowledged his role in the events of January 6th. And he has never disavowed the lies that were fed to the American people by him about who actually won the election.
The single article of impeachment charges that the president's offenses extend beyond his words at that rally. It also accuses him of trying to subvert and obstruct the results of the election by pressuring the Georgia Secretary of State to find nearly 12,000 votes to help him win.
So what are we going to do here, folks? I only need 11,000 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break.
Democrats claim Trump gravely endangered the security of the United States and its institutions of government.
He knew exactly what he was doing, and the outcome was deadly.
The big question tonight, will Trump be convicted? Democrats need 17 Republican senators to vote with them. A handful, like Mitt Romney, seem open.
Incitement to insurrection is an impeachable offense. If not, what is?
Other Republicans attacking the whole idea of putting the former president on trial.
I think the trial is stupid. I think it's counterproductive. We already have a flaming fire in this country, and it's like taking a bunch of gasoline and pouring it on top of the fire.
We're going to hear these arguments in the days and weeks ahead. Rachel Scott up on the Hill tonight. And Rachel, tomorrow senators, of course, will be sworn in as jurors. But we know Senate leaders have already agreed the trial itself won't get underway until the week of February 8th. And tonight you've also learned that Chief Justice John Roberts will not be presiding. That's a change from the first Trump impeachment trial. You'll fill us in on that. And what do we know among Republicans tonight? That key number, Democrats would need 17 for a conviction of the former president.
And David, Republican leader Mitch McConnell has said that he is keeping an open mind. He has not yet decided how he will vote in this trial. And so far, we have not heard from a single Republican senator who says they plan to vote to convict former President Donald Trump. And you mentioned that change with who will preside over this impeachment trial. The Constitution says the Chief Justice will preside over impeachment trial of the president. But Donald Trump is no longer in office. So now you'll see Senator Patrick Leahy step in to preside over this trial. He's the longest serving member of the majority party, and he will be taking a special oath to do impartial justice. But Leahy, as a sitting U.S. Senator, will also have a vote as a juror, David.
All right, Rachel Scott leading us off on this Monday night with the breaking news. Rachel, thank you. In the meantime, we turn next tonight to the coronavirus. President Biden late today on when he thinks Americans who want a vaccine, want a shot, will actually be able to get one in this country. Also tonight, growing concern over the vaccine supply in the U.S. and will the vaccines work against these new variants? Tonight, Pfizer and Moderna believe their vaccines do work against that UK variant seen here in the U.S. But there is concern about a variant seen in South Africa. Tonight, vaccine maker Moderna, for one.
Seriousness of our responsibilities. We also know the seriousness of what happened on January the 6th.
Again, that article of impeachment will be walked over, Molly, in just a few minutes this evening. What about this and how it plays politically once this trial begins?
Right, it makes sense why the Democrats want to do this impeachment and trial. They're trying to separate Republican elected officials from Republican voters. And this is a way that they think will work to cleave the party. It looks like it's not actually working. In the House, you had very few Republicans fall for the stunt led by Nancy Pelosi and members of the media. And in the Senate, you definitely have these people who are consumed with dislike for the former president. But it has so many problems going into this. We have word that the Chief Justice is not going to bother sitting for the trial. Of course, if it were a legitimate trial, he would have to sit for it because the Constitution requires impeachment, that an impeachment trial be overseen by the Chief Justice if it's of the president. But it's not of the president. It's of a private citizen. And so you're having more and more members of the Senate say that they just don't even see the constitutional basis for this. But it will be something that the media and Democrats will definitely be pushing in the days to come.
Harold, obviously you saw the senators of the weekend, some of them defending this process and the need for the trial, but in the big picture, getting the Biden agenda through obviously is where the administration's focus is. Does this hurt that effort?
Well, thanks for having me on, and good evening. I think that if these were prosecutors in a regular courtroom, the prima facie case here is pretty indisputable, and a lot of the facts are overwhelming. But this is a political exercise, as you rightly point out. And the question becomes, can you get 17 Republicans to go along with you? I think the larger question, and I don't necessarily disagree with some of the political analysis Molly's statement contained about the division this may create. I don't know if Democrats are driving. I think Mitt Romney might be one of the big drivers as well. But I think the larger question for the country, if you listen to the words of Mitch McConnell, who went to the Senate floor, his words will be memorialized forever. He said the President of the United States fed a group of people, called them a mob, a bunch of lies, and incited them to riot. I think the question becomes, do we follow Kevin McCarthy's words early on? He said perhaps a censure is necessary or appropriate. Or do we not punish the president at all? Or do we go all the way to an impeachment? I don't think the Senate will go all the way to an impeachment or a conviction, rather. But I do think the question remains for all of us as Americans. Should a president who's on his way out of office, or her office will say one day, should they be allowed to get away with something like this? My answer as an American is no. And I'll be curious to see how the House and the Senate handle this over the next several days.
Yeah. Newsmax distraction machine is going to be able to save them once we hear that testimony under oath. Now, with respect to the Justice Department story, I mean, even by Trump standards, Ari, it's a crazy story. I mean, I'm not sure what's the number, which is higher, the number of times that Joe Biden won Georgia or the number of impeachable offenses that Trump committed while trying to do so. And that's Trump. But, you know, the story here is, to me, the most significant story of the Justice Department in 50 years. That the president was pushing the Justice Department to the point of saying he was going to replace the acting attorney general with one of the subordinates who would do his business and interfere with the Georgia election. I mean, that is breathtaking. That's Putin-esque.
Yeah, I'm glad you put your finger on that because, again, I'm not blind and deaf to what's going on in an evolution and the exhalation many Americans felt on Wednesday. But those feelings, emotional, political, or otherwise, cannot guide the constitutional rule of law. And so, as you remind everyone, multiple abuses of power to steal the election, and a question about whether others, as I mentioned, it's under investigation now, whether any others follow the evidence, participated in that criminal plot. There are people in prison tonight, separate from their families, sleeping in those hard beds, waiting to hopefully get out someday for a single instance of mistaken or non-malicious voter fraud. In the rare cases where it occurs on an individual basis. There are people in prison for dime bags. There are people in prison for tax mistakes. We are talking about people who, as you know from serving in government, held these posts, and we have to follow the evidence, but the question being, did they break the law? You mentioned, George, I want to play a little bit to remind everyone the context. This is what the president was secretly doing on that Georgia call. Take a listen.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have. The people of the country are angry, and there's nothing wrong with saying that, you know, that you've recalculated.
Neil?
So, Ari, now that is the subject of a separate Inspector General investigation into whether Trump pressured the U.S. attorney, the federal prosecutor in Atlanta. And then today, as you reported, there's a new Inspector General investigation into all this stuff about the Justice Department and trying to fire the acting Attorney General and the like. And heaven knows what else. I mean, we're only 5 days into the new administration, and already these massive shoes have dropped. So who knows what's next? I think the one thing that people haven't focused on is the role of Bill Barr in all of this, because the reports from the New York Times and other places are that Barr was facing all of this pressure from Trump starting right after the election to interfere in Georgia and the like. And, you know, I guess to his, modest credit, he didn't do it while he was there. But what did he do in the face of all that pressure? He packed up his bags and went home and quit. He didn't, stop it or anything like that. He left it for his deputy. I mean, what a historic abdication of responsibility by the Attorney General, Bill Barr. I mean, this guy doesn't deserve to carry a copy of the Constitution around for the rest of his life. That is not the way to behave in the face of an unprecedented threat. And the president, if you're the Attorney General and the president is trying to do these machinations, you stop them. You don't just leave and leave it to your deputy to try and clean up your mess.
Neil?
We're deliberate. There's one article of impeachment to the Senate. The former president, Donald Trump, he's no longer in office. He's a private citizen. So what message are the Democrats sending with this historic impeachment trial that will formally begin the week of February 8th?
Well, thanks for having me back. The House managers are sending the most fundamental message under the American Constitution and U.S. law, that no person is above the law. Donald Trump, as we'll hear when lead manager Jamie Raskin, one of the great constitutional scholars ever to serve in the House of Representatives, reads that article, we'll hear that Donald Trump clearly incited an insurrection. That there's no doubt about the factual basis or the legal basis. Well, this was the nightmare of the framers of the Constitution, that a president would use a mob to disrupt the electoral process corruptly to benefit himself. And finally, since there's no question about the facts, no real question about the law, we'll be looking for the thing this trial will be about. Courage. Will 17 Republican senators have the courage to do the right thing and convict and disqualify Donald Trump?
You need a 2/3 majority in the Senate to convict 67 senators. There are 50 Democrats. You need 17 Republicans. Caitlin, you were in the White House briefing earlier today. We saw you ask questions. The Biden administration clearly, based on everything we're seeing, doesn't want to get directly involved or weigh in on this trial. They want to leave it up to the Senate, right?
Yeah, and I think they're torn between these two spots where, of course, Democrats do want to see President Trump held accountable. We've heard that time and time again from all of those lawmakers on Capitol Hill. But the other concern is that it's overshadowing Joe Biden's first few days in office. It could potentially imperil his agenda, given that he wants to get that coronavirus legislation that he's proposed passed once it gets through negotiations, which, of course, there's been some pushback on that. But there's also a concern about getting his nominees confirmed because, of course, they now have agreed to this delay after President Biden pushed for it and when that trial is actually going to start. But it's still something that's looming because the longer they push it, the more it's still out there as they're trying to move on and turn the page from his predecessor to move on with this. So I think it is something that's looming over there. No other president has had to deal with this, a former president facing an impeachment trial in their first few days in office. So it's kind of uncharted territory, and they're trying to make their way through it. But I think that you are seeing that sense of hesitancy from White House officials to weigh in on it or generate any headlines around it. Though, of course, we did see President Biden weigh in last week and say he actually agreed with the Republicans on when that trial should start, not with Democrats, who, of course, were kickstarting it today, potentially, with the delivering this impeachment article over to the Senate.
You know,
again.
But I guess life goes a few breaks further west, but it's not looking like we'll start to see more breaks until Wednesday afternoon. Snowfall forecast showing the heaviest snow just off to our south, kind of right along Highway 20 generally across parts of Iowa, but the really heavy
over a half a foot of snow there. I-80 will be mostly a mix. The snow gets in the New York Metro by mid-morning tomorrow and then pushes up to Boston and Albany by late day. Not a lot of snow in the big cities along I-95, but could see 6 to 12 inches in parts of the Midwest and certainly dangerous driving conditions across a snow zone and another storm behind that one.
David, a lot of activity to track. We thank you, Rob. And there is late word coming in tonight. The Senate this evening now confirming President Biden's pick for Treasury Secretary. Janet Yellen tonight confirmed by a vote of 84 to 15. She is the first woman to hold the post. This is President Biden's third cabinet nominee to be confirmed now by the Senate. When we come back here on this Monday night, protests erupting after a police car plows through a crowd. 2 people hurt, at least 1 person reportedly run over, and there is news tonight about the officer.
I'm a performer. Always have been and always
need to do that. Harold, what about this kind of, you know, one thing was called one thing and now it's something different?
Look, facts change and circumstances change, which means your reactions to the change. I'm always surprised when politicians say they've had the same position for 40 years and expect to be applauded for that. Facts should make you think differently. If the president now is wrong about something, you just admit it. I think this president knows, President Biden, whom I supported, that if he does not get his arms around vaccine distribution, there's no doubt he inherited a mess with regard to vaccine distribution. Disease and dysfunction defeated President Trump. What President Biden has to understand, and I think he does fully, you have to get this distribution right and you have to get the economy reopened. Gavin Newsom's facing challenges in California because people believe he shouldn't have gone out to a restaurant and some other things have gathered around him. I think he's right to be smart about the science and to follow it. The Democrats need to understand one thing. But for disease and but for the dysfunction of this last president, Joe Biden would not have been elected. I'm a Democrat and I can say that. We have to get these 2 things right. It's only been 5 days though. He's been in office for less than 200 hours. Let's give him a chance. I think he's on the right path, and if he's not, voters will say so in a few years.
Byron?
Well, I think the president is trying to actually keep up with what's going on with this disease right now. I say this with a lot of caution, but the number of cases nationally has gone down fairly dramatically, down 33% in the last 14 days, and the number of deaths is a lagging indicator of that, but it has begun to turn down 5%. And I think what you're seeing here is Joe Biden trying to adjust from his campaign rhetoric to governing rhetoric, saying today that maybe 1 million a day vaccinations won't work. It should be 1.5 million. That would be a better number.
Okay, panel, when we come back, the impeachment article against former President Trump makes the walk from the House to the Senate. At least we think it will. Keep it here.
You said it. Is that?
Of former White House official Boris Epshteyn, your response, sir.
Well, the most important thing to understand about the violent attack on the Capitol that Donald Trump incited is why were the people there? They were summoned to Washington by Donald Trump. He showed up to greet them, as you indicated, Ari, but most importantly, it was all because of a big lie that Donald Trump perpetrated, that he actually won the election and the presidency was being stolen from him. Notwithstanding the fact that Donald Trump's FBI concluded no evidence of voter fraud. The Department of Justice concluded no evidence of voter fraud. Bill Barr, his former Attorney General, no evidence of voter fraud. Republican elected officials all across the land, including in Georgia and Arizona, no evidence of voter fraud. Court decision after court decision after court decision written by Trump-appointed judges and/or Republican judges concluded no evidence of voter fraud, yet the lie persisted. And that's why there were people there to stop the peaceful transfer of power, to storm the Capitol, because they actually believed the big lie. That was really where the incitement began. And so, Ari, to point to one...
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
to point to one word in a speech where he also encouraged them to show strength, to take your country back, and had consistently done so, and had people talking about trial by combat and things of that nature. When you look at the totality of the incitement, to me, it's clear the president must, former president, twice impeached president, must be held accountable.
Bring to the life-altering decisions the judges are frequently.
He is old enough to be Mahomes' father. Then again, is your dad playing in the Super Bowl?
Brady goes for the deep shot.
This is a generational showdown. The old guard taking on the new guard. The 43-year-old legend against the 25-year-old kid. Just in time, a battle for the ages to entertain, distract, and make us, once again, feel like a kid. Or the GOAT. You pick. Mola Lengi, CBS News, Tampa.
You know who I'm going to be picking. It's going to be a great game. We'll be right back. This portion of the CBS Evening News is sponsored by Liberty.
It's about why this is a constitutional process going forward. But another key question too, Aaron, is whether or not they bring witnesses before this trial. Of course, all the senators here witnessed what happened on January 6th, but I am told that there's a discussion about trying to bring in someone who may provide more insight into Donald Trump's thinking. But does that person exist? Will that person cooperate? Will that lead to a protracted fight to bring someone who may know what Donald Trump was doing and thinking and how he was acting in the run-up to the January 6th riot? That is unclear. Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, just told me just earlier this evening that he does not know himself if they will pursue witnesses in this trial. So a lot of big questions here. Also uncertain how long this will last. Probably less than 21 days, which was the amount it took in 2020. But it could still eat up much of February, the key time in Joe Biden's agenda here.
All right. Thank you, Manu, and please stay with us because, of course, as this happens, we're going to talk to Manu. We're awaiting this happening any moment. Let's go straight to our experts here. And let me begin with you, Dan. As you cover this, the article about to be, formally transmitted to the Senate. We're all going to watch it here live. And then Manu's going through this a little bit, what the calendar looks like. You get the senators sworn in tomorrow, as he said. The trial, though, doesn't begin until February 9th, an agreement between Schumer and McConnell. So what exactly happens between then and now?
What happens is each side prepares. The Trump team especially, they have to form a team. We know that he has retained a lawyer, but we don't know if there are others that have come on board. It's a big job to, as we saw a year ago when the then sitting president went before the trial happened. He had a team of lawyers, and we're going to see that happen. And then, of course, the 9 managers that you were just talking about with Manu, they have to come up with their plan and have to decide about witnesses. We're going to see briefs and so forth. So that's what they're going to do as they prepare. The other main reason is not just preparation, is for delaying it, is to give President Biden time to actually get his cabinet confirmed and perhaps push through a stimulus bill.
Right? Okay, and I just want everyone to understand what we're looking at. That is the door that we expect Congressman Raskin to walk through, obviously, to do this as the lead manager. So this is, so everyone understands why we're doing this. You just saw the former Majority Leader Mitch McConnell walk by. I'm sorry. So just to give everyone a sense of the running walkthrough of what's happening. Gloria,
Improvement Company, 2020.
swear in the senators as jurors, and then they take about 2 weeks for both sides to get their legal briefs together, and starting on February 9th, that's when the Senate trial begins in earnest. Brett?
Chad, you've talked to a lot of people up there. Does anybody think that they could get 17 Republicans to vote to convict?
Certainly not right now, and this is something that Lindsey Graham, the Republican senator from South Carolina, said just a few minutes ago. Quote, he says, I guess it depends on what state you're in and what phase your political career is in. There might be a handful of Republicans on the Senate side who might vote to convict the President of the United States, and they will take their lead, some will, from Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader. Again, the other thing that you have to watch here for is if they were to convict Chuck Schumer, the new Majority Leader says they would take a second vote to permanently bar President Trump from ever taking office. That's a separate resolution. Keep in mind, they don't have to do that. They did not do that in 1989 with an impeachment trial for Alcee Hastings, who was a federal judge. And that's why Alcee Hastings has been Congressman Alcee Hastings since 1993.
Mm-hmm. And is there a feeling, Chad, that Mitch McConnell's stance on this, and we should look at this, we are under 2 minutes now for the walkover, that Mitch McConnell's stance is somehow as a result of losing control of the Senate?
It's a combination of things. You know, there's no love lost between Mitch McConnell and President Trump. Mitch McConnell seems to blame the president as to why they lost control of the Senate. He's now the minority leader. There's a reason why it's 50-50 right now. Plus, Mitch McConnell is an institutionalist. He was very bothered, and that might be a light term here, about what happened on January 6th, where you had this attack on the U.S. Capitol.
That's right. Chad, as always, thank you. We'll again see that walk momentarily. Thank you for inviting us into your home tonight.
So that the American people get it. And I'm confident that the impeachment managers will do just that.
Straight no chaser, the final word from Congressman Jeffries. Thank you, sir. Our MSNBC...
About the struggles of welcoming it.
With the masks on, these are the 9 impeachment managers. David Cicilline there, Joaquin Castro, Eric Swalwell, Ted Lieu, Stacey Plaskett, Madeline Dean. You see all of them. There are 9 in total, as we said, 7 for the last, 9 here. This is part of the formal process. As I said, only the 4th time in American history that you've seen this, walking across from the House to the Senate to formally deliver this article. It is just one article of impeachment for the former President Donald J. Trump. You see the lead impeachment manager there behind Ms. Johnson, Jamie Raskin. And you know, one thing that is interesting to think about here, Abby, is that this is only the 4th time this has happened in American history, and yet
Democratic House members who will serve as impeachment managers, led by Representative Jamie Raskin of Vermont. He'll actually read the article to the Senate, setting in motion the unprecedented 2nd impeachment trial of Donald Trump. I want to go right now to Capitol Hill correspondent Casey Hunt. Casey, where were you a year ago? We've seen this before.
We have seen this before, Lester, and that is what is so remarkable about the history being made here. I think you and I
to your 4 walls. So collaboration is always a good thing, and letting more people know what you do is
who's already left office, and that may be a lot of the focus of the legal team as they make that case.
The other question surrounding this is whether or not this is an effort to ensure that Donald Trump cannot run again. Brett, we will be watching. Thank you so much. Brett Baer in Washington. Joining me right now is House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy to react. Congressman, it's good to see you. We want to get the GOP's response to all of this. Your reaction?
Purely political. If you look at this, if the House is supposed to be the grand jury, there were no hearings, there was no investigation, it was just rushed through. And there's no bigger example of how political this is by seeing who one of the managers is, Eric Swalwell. Eric Swalwell, who was associated with a Chinese spy. I was briefed by the FBI. If any Democrat had the same briefing that I was, they wouldn't have Eric Swalwell, one on the Intel Committee, let alone a manager.
6 impeachment managers before they enter. And then you're going to see Patrick Leahy is going to be the President Pro Tem of the Senate. He's going to be presiding over the actual impeachment trial. It will not be the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court because the impeached in this case is a former president, not a current president, so it's a slightly different protocol.
Consent that the quorum call be vitiated.
No objection. The hour of 7 p.m. having arrived, the acting Sergeant Arms will present the managers on the part of the House of Representatives.
Mr. President and members of the Senate, I announce the presence of the managers on the part of the House of Representatives to conduct proceedings on behalf of the House concerning the impeachment of Donald John Trump, former President of the United States.
The managers on the part of the House will be received and escorted to the well of the Senate.
I think that the Bison Center will attract new visitors to the park. It will.
And stealing valuables outside of gyms in the southwestern part.
Hear ye, hear ye. All persons are commanded to keep silent on pain of imprisonment while the House of Representatives is exhibiting to the Senate of the United States an article of impeachment against Donald John Trump, former President of the United States.
The managers on the part of the House will proceed.
Mr. President, the managers on the part of the House of Representatives are here and present and ready to present the article of impeachment, which has been preferred by the House of Representatives against Donald John Trump, former President of the United States. The House adopted the following resolution, which with the permission of the Senate, I will read. House Resolution 40 in the House of Representatives, United States, January 13th, 2021, resolved that Mr. Raskin, Ms. DeGette, Mr. Cicilline, Mr. Castro of Texas, Mr. Swalwell, Mr. Liu, Ms. Plaskett, Mr. Nagus, and Ms. Dean are appointed managers to conduct the impeachment trial against Donald John Trump, President of the United States, that a message be sent to the Senate to inform the Senate of the appointments, and that the managers so appointed may, in connection with the preparation and the conduct of the trial, exhibit the article of impeachment to the Senate and take all other actions necessary, which may include the following: employing legal, clerical, and other necessary assistance, and incurring such other expenses as may be necessary to be paid from amounts available to the Committee on the Judiciary under applicable expense resolutions or from the applicable accounts of the House of Representatives. 2, sending for persons and papers and filing with the Secretary of the Senate on the part of the, in conjunction with or subsequent to the exhibition of the articles of impeachment that the managers consider necessary. Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House of Representatives. With the permission of the Senate, I will now read the article of impeachment. House Resolution 20, Representatives. With the permission of the Senate, I will now read the article of impeachment. House Resolution 24 in the House of Representatives, United States, January 13th, 2021, resolved that Donald John Trump, President of the United States, is impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors, and that the following article of impeachment be exhibited to the United States Senate. Article of impeachment exhibited by the House of Representatives of the United States of America in the name of itself and of the people of the United States of America against Donald John Trump, President of the United States of America in maintenance and support of its impeachment against him for high crimes and misdemeanors. Article 1, incitement of insurrection. The Constitution provides that the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment, and the President shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Further, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution prohibits any person who has, quote, engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States from holding any office under the United States, unquote. In his conduct while President of the United States and in violation of his constitutional oath faithfully to execute the office of the President of the United States and to the best of his ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, Donald John Trump engaged in high crimes and misdemeanors by inciting violence against the government of the United States, in that on January 6, 2021, pursuant to the 12th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, the Vice President of the United States, the House of Representatives, and the Senate met at the United States Capitol for a joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. In the months preceding the joint session, President Trump repeatedly issued false statements asserting that the presidential election results were the product of widespread fraud and should not be accepted by the American people or certified by state or federal officials. Shortly before the joint session commenced, President Trump addressed a crowd at the Ellipse in Washington, D.C. There, he reiterated false claims that we won this election and we won it by a landslide. He also willfully made statements that in context encouraged and foreseeably resulted in lawless action at the Capitol, such as, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. Thus incited by President Trump, members of the crowd he had addressed in an attempt to, among other objectives, interfere with the joint session's solemn constitutional duty to certify the results of the 2020 presidential election, unlawfully breached and vandalized the Capitol, injured and killed law enforcement personnel, menaced members of Congress, the Vice President, and congressional personnel, and engaged in other violent, deadly, destructive, and seditious acts. President Trump's conduct on January 6, 2021 followed his prior efforts to subvert and obstruct the certification of the results of the 2020 presidential election. Those prior efforts included a phone call on January 2nd, 2021, during which President Trump urged the Secretary of State of Georgia, Brad Raffensperger, to, quote, find enough votes to overturn the Georgia presidential election results, and threatened Secretary Raffensperger if he failed to do so. In all this, President Trump gravely endangered the security of the United States and its institutions of government. He threatened the integrity of the democratic system, interfered with the peaceful transition of power, and imperiled a co-equal branch of government. He thereby betrayed his trust as president to the manifest injury of the people of the United States. Wherefore, manifest injury of the people of the United States. Wherefore, Donald John Trump, by such conduct, has demonstrated that he will remain a threat to national security, democracy, and the Constitution if allowed to remain in office, and has acted in a manner grossly incompatible with self-governance and the rule of law. Donald John Trump thus warrants impeachment and trial, removal from office, and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House of Representatives. Mr. President, that completes the exhibition of the article of impeachment against Donald John Trump, President of the United States. The managers request that the Senate take order for the trial. The managers now request leave to withdraw.
We can proceed with the trial. Thank you.
You're seeing the 9 impeachment managers walk out here. Another moment in American history here. The second time for an impeachment trial for President Trump. There have only, of course, been 4 impeachments in the House in American history, 2 for Trump. So you just saw history being made here. And, of course, as a former president, this is a moment in history. You see there the clerk, Cheryl Johnson. They are preparing, along with the 9 managers, to walk back to the House of Representatives. This is part of the circumstance and part of the moment, part of history here.
Still doing. She called the Homeland Security. She made fun of them. She called them troopers, and they shouldn't be around. This is what Nancy Pelosi really thinks of the National Guard. And just think last week, after the inaugural, when these National Guard, these men and women defending us, sitting in the Capitol, she was kicking them out into the winter.
Congressman, as we wrap up here, what are you going to do about it? You're the head of the GOP. They are impeaching a former president, and you will do what?
Well, we just put in the House, and the one thing I first did was vote no, because it's a political move. It goes against everything we know about the impeachment process. If we're a grand jury gets to call witnesses. A grand jury gets to have hearings, and we didn't get any of that. I hope the Senate plays their role in what they should do and vote this down. But what we're doing as Republicans, we're confronting exactly what Joe Biden is doing about killing American jobs, making Russia and China stronger, getting our Americans back to work, getting back to the American first policy, not China first. And that's the scary part of what's happening today.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that tonight and look at this agenda after those multitude of executive orders on day 1 and day 2. Congressman, it's good to see you this night. Thank you so much.
Good to have you
keep following
TV, Maria. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Congressman. Also joining us tonight, Republican Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio. He led President Trump's defense during impeachment proceedings in the House earlier this month. Congressman, it is good to see you. So now what?
Good to be with you. Yeah, good to be with you, Maria.
Well, we watched the Senate receive the impeachment article. Do you agree with Kevin McCarthy that you're not going to get all of the Republicans to vote for this? Where does this go? How does this play out, Congressman?
Well, I mean, look, first, the case is so ridiculous. I mean, how do you incite a riot that was already planned? How do you incite a breach of the Capitol that happened before the president even completed his speech? And how can you charge the president with inciting violence at the Capitol when he told the people at the rally to peacefully and patriotically make their voices heard? So this is really, as Kevin just said, an obsession with the Democrats. I mean, look, they tried to remove President Trump from office before he got there. They're trying to remove him now that he's already left. I mean, it's really that ridiculous. Remember, Maria, on January 20th, 2017, 19 minutes after President Trump took the oath of office, the Washington Post headline read, "Campaign to impeach President Trump has begun." They have never stopped going after this president, even now that he's already left, and the American people see it for what it is. It's pure politics, and it's wrong.
Agree with that. If they don't see it that way, have they explained to you how they don't see it that way?
Well, I think it's really important what you said here, right? The reason that the article that was presented to us today has context around it is because what happened on the January 6th was not an isolated event. In fact, every single day leading up to January 6th, Donald Trump was trying to find every avenue he could to try to stay in power, despite the fact that he had definitively lost the election. And when all of those avenues had failed, he then ultimately turned to the mob and told them to march upon the Capitol, to intimidate members of Congress or storm the building, as it turned out they did, to try to stop the vote from happening. And your question is, do Republicans deny this? And the answer is no, they don't. We know that because their main argument today is not that Donald Trump is innocent. It's that by convicting him, we would somehow be disunifying the country. Well, listen, the American rule of law is built on a series of rules and then a series of consequences if you violate those rules. And if we just skip the accountability phase for what Donald Trump did, then I'm not sure why future presidents wouldn't engage in the same kind of action. And believe me, Donald Trump still has a grip on this party. There are going to be others like him coming up through the ranks, whether aspiring to be president or governor. We have to make sure that we go through the accountability phase for the injustices he committed.
Who could be called, they also have a lot of evidence that is being collected by the FBI, by federal officials who are prosecuting the cases against the rioters, who have collected evidence that seems to indicate that many of them believe that they were incited by President Trump. So whether Democrats decide to bring witnesses themselves or bring in evidence from some of these cases, day by day, the amount of evidence that is available to them is enormous. And I think that it really, in some cases, could help them build a case. So the problem is it may not end up mattering at the end of the day. Many Republicans don't seem interested in the arguments for or against conviction. They're more interested in finding a way out of this political problem that they have.
You know, Dana, this is an interesting thing, right? On the more evidence part, everyone who was there saw what happened and experienced what happened. The whole country saw what happened, and everyone heard what Trump said and the words that he said in the months before, and everyone's heard the word echo of the people who were there that day echoing him, right? All of that's already there. The question is, do they go bigger? And, you know, this point about the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times reporting that Trump was pushing the Department of Justice to try to, you know, go directly to the Supreme Court to invalidate the election win, right? That he was trying to push his Justice Department to do that. He only stopped when basically the entire senior Justice Department staff, including his own acting Attorney General, said they would quit if he did so. Is there any evidence like this that would sway Republicans?
You know, the answer is yes, if they are not where Abby just described, which it seems as though she's, of course, you know, dead right about where many of them are, which is looking for an exit ramp and looking for an off-ramp. And some of them have latched on to the belief, even though there are real disagreements among constitutional lawyers, that it is not constitutional. Others are you know, finding other excuses to vote no, even though privately they will tell you that they believe that the president was highly involved in this and that he did instigate it. I mean, it was obvious from what he said. The question is whether or not the impeachment managers are going to be able to get anybody at the Justice Department who might be a witness to or a part of conversations that the president had beforehand, or even people who were in and around the president on that day, the day before, to testify to his involvement beyond what we might know. The notion of them actually getting somebody to agree to do that is going to be very difficult. Doesn't mean they're not going to try.
This girl, I look up to him so much.
The 21-year-old from Columbus, Ohio, has built something of a reputation for jaw-dropping routines, earning rave reviews for this Beyonce-inspired routine last year. This time, there was no crowd, but for Dennis, that was no problem. Cheered on not just by her teammates, but millions of online admirers, even Janet Jackson.
I'm just so honored, so blessed, and so thankful that all of these people are acknowledging me and shining light, and I'm just so thankful.
Dennis says she wanted to celebrate Black excellence. She clearly achieved some of her own, too. Nia scored a 9.95 score out of a possible 10. We'll be right back.
All the time. Sleep.
The U.S. Supreme Court dismissed lawsuits accusing President Trump of illegally profiting from his businesses and a Washington, D.C. hotel while in office. The court ruled the cases are moot because he's no longer in office. The suits allege that Mr. Trump violated the constitutional ban on taking payments from foreign officials through his business ventures. The Biden White House says that from now on, its daily briefings will include an American Sign Language interpreter. Press Secretary Jen Psaki was joined by one today on a YouTube stream of the event. Previous presidents used interpreters occasionally. And on Wall Street today, stocks had a mixed Monday, searching for direction. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 37 points to close at 30,960. But the NASDAQ rose nearly 93 points, and the S&P 500 added 13. Still to come on the NewsHour, COVID infections and deaths continue to rise as the vaccination campaign lags behind projections. Hundreds of thousands of farmers protest new laws deregulating agriculture in India. Our Politics Monday team breaks down the many changes made by the Biden administration, and much more.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
There has been some better news about the pandemic of late. More than two-thirds of states are reporting a decline in the number of new cases. The country is averaging 170,000 new cases a day over the last week. More than 130,000 people are hospitalized, and vaccine distribution has improved some. But as concerns over new variants of the virus loom, Amna Nawaz looks at how far we still have to go with vaccinations.
Judy, so far there have been more than 40 million doses of the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines delivered around the country. More than half, about 22 million, according to Bloomberg's vaccine tracker, have been administered to people. And the pace has increased to more than 1.1 million shots a day over the past week. Now, as a whole, the country has given out nearly 7 doses for every 100 people, again, according to Bloomberg. But the rates of vaccination and just how much supply is going out vary widely by state, city, or county. As you can see on this map, states like West Virginia with darker shading have the highest percentage of vaccines given out. The lighter colors around much of the U.S. reflect lower rates of distribution. So what is driving these disparities? And what does this mean for the country as a whole? Jen Cates of the Kaiser Family Foundation joins us again to dig deeper into all of this. Jen Cates, welcome back to the NewsHour, and thanks for being here. Let's start with these differences we're seeing state by state. Broadly speaking, why are some states so much better at getting the vaccine that they have out the door and into people's arms than other states?
Hi, it's good to be here. I think what we're seeing right now, if you look across the country, it's a pretty complicated labyrinth, and it's different everywhere. So there's no similar experience happening in any county really compared to the next county. And part of the challenge is that we're starting at very different places and are dealing with a whole range of issues to try to figure out the most complex mass vaccination campaign ever. And we're already operating from a deficit of having a lot of challenges just dealing with COVID. So what we're now seeing is states pushing out doses to different eligibility groups, using different systems to alert people, and it's pretty complicated.
So that first
Washington, D.C. There, he reiterated
is threatening a, quote, new Cold War against any nation that would stand up to communist China and issuing sanctions on those who have pushed back. Joining me right now is John Ratcliffe. He is the former Director of National Intelligence. He has seen all of the intelligence, in fact, the most intelligence than anyone except for the sitting president. John Ratcliffe, it is wonderful to see you tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we get into China, I really want to get your take on what we just saw. One of the elements of this impeachment would mean removing any security that President Trump has. Is that right?
It would. I tell you, the whole exercise, though, Maria, is silly. President Trump has now been subjected to 2 impeachments. In neither one of them did he have due process. If you remember, in the first impeachment, he was deprived of lawyers for the first 71 of 76 days. You know, fundamental premise of our judicial system is due process. It's a fairness principle, and he was deprived of it. It was even worse this time. It was a 2-day proceeding. There was no investigation and no hearings, and so you have that issue. And then secondly, it's just really a farce. There's no constitutional basis to move forward with a trial against a private citizen, which is what Donald Trump is. So there are so many ways that, as your prior guests pointed out, this is purely a political exercise at this point. It's certainly not helpful to the American people. It's disrespectful to the office of the presidency. I wish it wasn't happening.
Director, I want to get into China and whether or not you believe that the Biden administration will be softer on China. The Trump administration obviously was the toughest on China in terms of pushing back with sanctions, with prosecutions, with tariffs. Do you believe Joe Biden will pull back?
Well, Maria, you talked about some of the things that China did just this week. I think it shows that China's testing the Obama administration. They, what I will say is, both publicly, what China is saying, and privately, what the intelligence showed us post-election is that China's happy that Joe Biden is president of the United States. It's what they wanted. And they sense weakness, and I don't mean that as an insult to President Biden, but China saw weakness from the Obama-Biden administration. And as you pointed out, it wasn't until the last 4 years of the Trump administration that someone stood up to a rising China with different policies and sanctions to hold them accountable in the world marketplace. But China wants to see if it's going to go back to business as usual as it was under the Obama-Biden administration. Will the Biden-Harris administration be the same? And so what you're seeing is they're testing to see whether or not the Biden administration will stand up to China. And what's important, Maria, is your point about the intelligence. No one has seen more intelligence in the last year than I have. And what the intelligence tells us is that China, and China alone, is our greatest national security threat. And it's where the Biden administration should be placing our greatest emphasis with regard to our national security policies and concerns. So the question is, will they? I watched a Real Haynes confirmation hearing, and there was some tough rhetoric on China, which was good, but rhetoric's got to translate into action, and we'll see if that happens. That hasn't been the history with Joe Biden. Let's hope that changes, because, Maria, this is not a political issue. This is about national security, and if the Biden administration fails, we all fail and suffer as a result of that by not taking China seriously.
Just jurors, they're also witnesses and victims and survivors of the crimes that led to the impeachment. So unlike Trump's first impeachment, the evidence isn't overheard phone calls or emails between government bureaucrats. This impeachment is more like you were the victim of a violent home invasion by some gang bangers, and now you get to decide whether the leader of the gang is guilty. It should be an open and shut case. If it's not, that's also going to be a sad story about our democracy.
And I'll go back to you then, Claire. There have been some senators who've tried to mount the ludicrous argument that you can't impeach Trump because he's no longer in office. Mitt Romney has already batted that down. That's ridiculous. It's happened before. People have been left office, they've resigned, and still been impeached. That's absurd. And so, listen, I'm a nerd, but I'm not that great at math, but I still can't count to 17 here. Despite how obvious it is, and the fact that these people were victimized too, with their staff, some of whom are 20-something kids straight out of college. They saw the terror in their staff members' eyes. They probably felt the terror themselves as they heard people banging on the doors, the way that we heard Speaker Pelosi described. I was just in that building last week interviewing the Speaker. Some of the glass is still broken. And yet you talk to these folks, they're not going to convict him. That is what's shocking to me. They experienced this. They're not going to convict him, right?
Yeah, this trial is going to be wrapped up with a lot of politics, and there are still members of the Senate who are very worried about their political future and how Trump plays into that.
And, you know, I get everyone saying, hey, aren't we excited that Trump is gone? Aren't we excited? Do we really want to talk about him again? Do we want to make him a martyr? Blah, blah, blah. I get all that. But this is a moment. This is a moment for our country. This is a moment for us to decide whether or not someone can take the reins of power in one of the most heralded democracies the world has ever known and conduct this kind of abusive conduct that threatened the actual lives of people who had been sent to Washington by American citizens. I mean, I just don't think we can look the other way under any circumstances. Will there be enough votes to convict? Probably not. Will those people ultimately be held accountable and have on their conscience the votes they cast? Absolutely, and that's the way it should be.
Do you think...
keep falling for, and this is the Beijing line.
Yeah, and we still have not heard Joe Biden say anything about China's role in the coronavirus. I've been waiting to hear what he has to say in terms of keeping them accountable. We've heard it from a lot of other people. Rick, we want to hear from you more often. It's great to see you tonight. Thank you so much, Rick Grinnell. Senator Ron Johnson tonight is denouncing the impeachment trial. He will be my special guest tomorrow night. Also, my exclusive interview with Secretary of State, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, right here tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining me tonight on Fox News Prime Time. Here's Tucker and Tucker Carlson tonight.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Happy Monday. Even his allies concede that Joe Biden isn't as quick as he used to be. It now takes him an hour and a half to watch 60 Minutes. But to be fair, Biden's administration may be the fastest in history. We are less than a week in, and the White House has already ended immigration enforcement, sent American troops into armed conflict, crippled the last remaining independent sector of our economy, and officially, for the first time in human history, denied the biological reality of sex differences.
Senators will pretend they don't even remember the alleged offense by then. That is the direction some Republicans are going. So before we go any further, before we get to the so-called contours of politics, here's a little reminder of what January 6th looked like. As if anyone could forget the chance of hang Mike Pence or the beatings or the 5 people who died in what after all was an insurrection incited by presidential lies about the election and enabled by Republican lawmakers who either bought into it or simply went along with it. Now, not even those 3 weeks later, not even 3 weeks later, those same lawmakers want you to just forget all that, and they're kind of acting like they have. There's no better example than
Senate, as the first president to be impeached twice, also becomes the first ex-president to face an impeachment trial. This was the scene moments ago as the House impeachment managers walked over to the Senate with the single article of impeachment charging Donald Trump with incitement of insurrection for his role in the January 6th assault on the Capitol.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. All persons are commanded to keep silent on pain of imprisonment while the House of Representatives is exhibiting to the Senate of the United States an article of impeachment against Donald John Trump.
Cleaner government, shrieked the puppets of Silicon Valley. The answer, of course, is they get away with it because no one stops them. This is the, quote, For the People Act we're talking about here. It's for the people, so shut up. What exactly does the Democratic Party intend to do for the people? Well, if you guessed enshrine their own rule by force forever, you win today's Daily Double. I'll take authoritarian political movements for 1,000, Alex. Good job. The For the People Act is the foundation of the Democratic Party's strategy to control the federal government well into your grandchildren's middle age.
McCarthy wasn't content to just let the former president off the hook. No, it wasn't the president's fault, he said. It's actually your fault.
I also think everybody across this country has some responsibility. Think about 4 years ago after the President Trump was sworn in. What happened the very next day?
The title was Resist, with people walking in the streets. Maxine Waters saying to confront people, confront them in the restaurants.
Now, for starters, it is dumb and obnoxious to bother people at the dinner table. But it's dumber and more obnoxious to equate that to putting on tactical gear, arming up, and storming the U.S. Capitol in a siege that took 5 lives and might have killed many more. But most of all, saying that everyone's responsible is really no different than saying no one is. Worse, this whole gaslighting effort is being done under the fig leaf of maintaining national unity, as though collective
Today, the new leader of the Senate, Senator Chuck Schumer, told my colleague Rachel Maddow what he expects to see in that trial next month and shared his own experience of the attempted insurrection.
A police officer in a big flak jacket and a big automatic machine gun across his way grabs me nicely by the collar and says, "Senator, we got to get out of here. You're in danger." I was 30 feet away from those sons of guns. 30 feet away from these nasty, racist, bigoted insurrectionists. Someone told me even during the Civil War, no Confederate flag ever flew in the Capitol. Even during the Civil War.
Could you hear them? Could you hear them?
Yes, yes. Now we have the trial, and make no mistake about it, President Trump will stand trial, and there will be a vote on his guilt. I hope he's voted guilty. The trial will be done in a way that is fair, but with relatively quickly. The evidence is all out there.
Notarization or witness signature or other formal authentication, other than a voter's word for it, as a condition of obtaining or casting an absentee ballot. Under H.R. 1, paid political operatives could freely go house to house, apartment to apartment, collecting unknown thousands of ballots, then dump them all at a ballot drop box. And no one would have any idea if those ballots had been tampered with at any point along the way, nor would there be any way to prove it if they had been tampered with. And by the way, H.R. 1 also makes it harder for election observers to file complaints about any of this because complaining is racist. A system like that...
About roughly 2 weeks of time for President Trump to get his legal affairs in order. There are 2 deadlines where that paperwork needs to be submitted, all in time for the trial itself to begin on February 9th.
And can you explain why the Senate President Pro Tem Patrick Leahy will be presiding instead of Chief Justice John Roberts, and what else the trial may look like in terms of witnesses and lawyers?
Yeah, it's a good question, Anderson. Under normal circumstances, if President Trump were still the president, constitutionally the Chief Justice would be required to preside over this impeachment trial. But because he's no longer the president, that allows the Senate some flexibility. And so the Chief Justice decided he did not want to be a part of it. Then it would fall to Vice President Kamala Harris. There was a conflict of interest with her, sir.
Take the Capitol! Take the Capitol! Take the Capitol! Take the Capitol! Take the Capitol right now! Take the Capitol!
Yeah! It's pretty clear what was going on there. We're going to go down to the Capitol, storm the Capitol, invade the Capitol, take the Capitol right now. They understood. Remember, those instructions to his adoring crowd came just a few days after the former president tried to bully the Georgia Secretary of State to fraudulently fabricate votes for him. We've now learned, just a few days after he attempted this insane coup within the Department of Justice, his plan to fire the acting Attorney General, replace him with a lackey who believed in the former president's alternate reality, in order to get the Department of Justice to start using the legal muscle of the U.S. government to push the president's seditious plot.
End quote. Wait a second. Conspiracy theories and false information about the United States government? Whoa. Sounds like these people could be in trouble.
You can see evidence in plain sight on the issue of collusion. So there's clear evidence on the issue of collusion, and this adds to that body of evidence. And there is significant evidence of collusion. There is ample evidence, and indeed there is. of collusion of people in the Trump campaign with the Russians. I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy. All of this is evidence of collusion. There is significant evidence, much of it in the public domain, on the issue of collusion.
Just kidding. The people who spent years peddling ludicrous conspiracy theories, disproven factually, theories that Vladimir Putin secretly controlled the federal government, those people will be fine. Because at this point, that would include pretty much everyone currently in power. Yes, they were needed.
And, you know, I know there's been some argument about the fact that he's a former president, but it has always been the practice of the United States Senate from the very earliest Congresses that former officials are subject to impeachment and trial. It would be a very dangerous precedent to depart from 200 years of history because you don't want to invite a president or a former or a federal official to just wait to the near end of their term and commit the most serious misconduct, an attack on our democracy, and figure they can avoid responsibility because it's near the end of their term. A president is responsible from the first day in office to the last day in office for their conduct, and we have a constitutional responsibility to hold this former president accountable and to proceed with the trial in the Senate.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of impeachment on the Senate floor, and he joins me now for an exclusive interview. Congressman, it's great to have you. Let's start, I guess, with the history that's being made and why it's important. You've seen some Republicans try to say, look, he's out of office now, so there's a lot going on. Why do we need to do this? And what is your answer to that?
Chris, thank you for having me on. This was, as we have argued and as we intend to show, the worst presidential crime against the Republic in American history. And the violence was terrifying and overwhelming. 5 people died. A police officer hit over the head with a fire extinguisher. Police officers beat up, grabbed, pushed, shoved, jostled. We saw some really extraordinary things that day. But what America needs to understand, of course, is that Wednesday, January 6th was not some random arbitrary day chosen by the president and the organizers of this rally. This was the day that Congress met in joint session, the House and the Senate, to count the Electoral College votes that had been certified by 50 states in the District of Columbia.
Tell you what to think. Your mind belongs to you. It is yours and yours alone. Once politicians attempt to control what you believe, they are no longer politicians. They are, by definition, dictators. And if they succeed in controlling what you believe, you are no longer a citizen. You are not a free man. You are a slave. So yes, Tom Friedman, this is frightening. It's everywhere all of a sudden. No one is pushing back. Instead, they have almost every one of them, join the mob of censors, hysterics, and Jacobin destroyers, all working on behalf of entrenched power to take total control of everything.
So Liz Cheney, Mitt Romney on one side, you have the Kevin McCarthy's, Marco Rubio's on the other side. Mitch McConnell, I'm not sure exactly where he is, I guess somewhere in between. It does seem like there is a real split in the GOP these days.
Well, it's important to remember this is the most bipartisan impeachment in American history. You had the third-ranking Republican in the House saying the president summoned the mob, he assembled the mob, he lit the flame, he was responsible for the violence at the Capitol, and many other Republicans who have made similar comments. What I hope is that we have 100 jurors, that they'll listen to the evidence, that they'll listen to the arguments, and they'll render a fair and impartial verdict based on that. And
it's in there. President Trump or any other Trump who's impeached and convicted does not spend a single day, a single hour, or a single minute in jail. It's not a criminal prosecution. It is a protective civil action to guard the republic against someone who has committed high crimes and misdemeanors against the people and proven himself to be a danger to the country.
That remedy you mentioned, which is in the Constitution and also part of the 14th Amendment, which you cite in the article and in the impeachment language, that this disqualification idea is present throughout the architecture of the Constitution precisely for this reason. And it strikes me that it's an interesting counter to the Democratic argument that was made, small d Democratic argument in the last impeachment trial was, well, there's just going to be an election in 9 months. Do you really want to do this? That really isn't at issue here, is it?
Well, we were founded as a constitutional democracy. We overthrew monarchy and the idea that the government belongs to the king or one man and his friends. According to the framers' vision, those of us who aspire to and attain to public office are nothing but the servants of the people. And the minute that we violate our constitutional oaths and begin to usurp the government for our own purposes and commit high crimes and misdemeanors against the government, that is the moment that we forfeit our public office. Nobody has a constitutional right to be there. And the framers wanted to create a lot of ways to separate ourselves from people who were a danger to the continuation of Republican rule. And that's why we have a Republican guarantee clause. That's why we have a peaceful transfer of power. What happened on Wednesday, January 6th was a direct attack on the peaceful transfer of power under the Constitution.
The possibility of reviving the fairness doctrine, which the FCC enforced until 1987, and which mandated some minimal standards of factuality and balance on the part of TV stations. And since that's disappeared, it's just been a complete free-for-all with all sorts of lunacy being fed directly into the right-wing ecosystem.
Max Boot, ladies and gentlemen, on the fairness doctrine. The fairness doctrine is pretty amusing. Ignore the fact that the fairness doctrine does not even apply to cable news since the U.S. government doesn't own the cable lines. What you should consider is the idea that Max Boot just explained, that it's, quote, unfair for one news outlet to disagree with every other news outlet in the country. So diversity of opinion is unfair. Sameness is fair. That's why it should be mandatory. It's inclusive. Hilarious. In addition to everything else, you may have figured this out already, these people are stupid. Of course they're stupid. That's why our country's in trouble. Because the
reason it's very unlikely that they're going to act. I mean, the notion, as Representative Cicilline just said, the notion that you would not act here because he's no longer in office completely omits the argument of, or escapes the argument of, you can then ban him from office forever, which seems like an appropriate punishment for someone who incited an insurrection against the U.S. Capitol while they were president. But I don't think that's going to happen, Anderson. I think people are going to do what we've seen for the last 4 years and run for the hills.
And David Gergen, it seems like the easy argument Republican senators can make is that they just think constitutionally you can't try a president after he leaves office, and therefore they don't have to kind of address anything else.
Right, absolutely. This whole effort to bring up the constitutional questions of whether the president's being treated unfairly because he is an ex-president, is clearly an attempt to dodge the main issues at hand. You can stand up and say we shouldn't be doing this because it's unconstitutional, therefore I never have to come to say whether I agree or disagree whether he incited the riot. That's sort of point one. Point two is they can, the longer they can drag things out and make the argument that the president is somehow being treated unfairly, the more they can poison the reaction to what happens here. I think that, generally speaking, Americans right now feel that the Republicans insisted rightly that Trump get a fair trial. Well, that's what he's got. He's got a fair trial. But now Americans are expecting their senators to stand up and give a fair verdict, to look.
Spirit of Tommy Raskin, and we've been collecting the extraordinary essays that he wrote, and I hope we'll be publishing them soon. A lot of them were already online, a lot of his poetry, a lot of his plays, but also we've got a bunch of unpublished things, including papers he wrote during school, and in addition to everything else, he was magnificently funny and lighthearted. And so anyway, we want to get these out to people, but thank you for your condolences, Chris. We feel a little bit better each day, and we feel a little bit better each day that the people rally to defend our republic against this monstrous attack on the Constitution and the people.
All right. From one father to another, I just can't imagine what it is to do what you're doing right now. And thank you for all that you've done, Congressman Jamie Raskin, the lead impeachment manager for the House. Thank you so much, sir.
And thank you for having me, Chris.
Stamos said all of this out loud.
It's really hard because what's happening is people are able to seek out the information that makes them feel good. And that is what's happening, is that people have so much choice now. They can choose what their news sources are. They can choose what influencers they want to follow. We have to turn down the capability of these conservative influencers to reach these huge audiences. There are people on YouTube, for example, that have a larger audience than daytime CNN, and they are extremely radical and pushing extremely radical views.
So in the name of democracy, clearly the term of the moment, in the defense of the people's will, we must censor people and make certain that individuals can't read and hear what they choose to read and hear. At least they're being honest about it. Information is power. They want the power, therefore they must control the information. And so they are. That's what's happening. We told you a moment ago that nobody seems to be fighting back against this tide of repression, but that's not entirely true. This weekend, Rupert Murdoch, the man who started this company, won an award from a foundation in the UK. And here's part of what he said when he accepted it. Quote, "For those of us in the media, there is a real challenge to confront. A wave of censorship that seeks to silence conversation, to stifle debate, to ultimately stop individuals and societies from realizing their potential. This rigidly enforced conformity, aided and abetted by so-called social media, is a straitjacket on sensibility. Too many people have fought too hard in too many places for freedom of speech to be suppressed by this awful woke orthodoxy." This awful...
Only four-letter word we use is soft. Go to TommyJohn.com and get 15% off your first order with this code.
Cover it up. That's what I did when I started losing my hair.
I think the sketchy website I bought this turtle from stole all my info. Ooh, have you looked on the bright side?
I guarantee you have nothing to lose. Sleep well, America!
And while we were airing that, right now, and you were watching it, Republican Minority Leader Mitch McConnell just put out a statement that he is folding on this. He's apparently now going to agree to go forward with what Senator Schumer told him he must do, with letting Senator Schumer and the Democratic majority take over and install committee chairmen and all the rest, using the rules that we had in place the last time the Senate was in a 50-50 split, which is back in 2001. And he will agree to that, apparently, as of tonight, without any extraneous demands about the filibuster or anything else. Since we have been on the air tonight airing that interview, Senator Mitch McConnell has caved and Senator Schumer has won that fight. That was quick. Let's see what else we can do. More from my interview with Senator Chuck Schumer is ahead, including him making some additions.
Of that fresh...
Gut reaction is that Mitch McConnell is still very much in a powerful position. It's not a 51-49, it's a 50-50. And as you've been pointing out for the last several nights, it means that he's got a seat at the table and then some has to be dealt with. And frankly, it seems like thus far, he's been able to outmaneuver Chuck Schumer. And the person who I think is suffering in all this is the brand new president, because instead of being able to at least have a clean shot at launching his legislative initiatives, now not only does he have to deal with the Senate in a state of flux, but he's got an impeachment trial that's 2 weeks away that's going to take all the oxygen out of the room.
So the headline is, Mitch McConnell says, haven't heard from Schumer, but Mitch McConnell says they have a power-sharing deal. And now something that would only happen on this show. Governor Kasich is about to have to defend the Democrats. How is Schumer not getting his clock clean? Hold on a second. Here's the question today. You can brush it aside. You can brush it aside after I ask it. That's what Michael does. Here's the question. How did Schumer get into a position where McConnell gets to dictate the state of play of a deal, and why should he have any deal with McConnell in this kind of environment?
I'm going to give you the answer, because you have two Democrats at least that won't vote to blow up the filibuster.
And blowing up the filibuster would have been a disaster for this country. Let me tell you why. Now it forces the parties to work together. If one party could just smash through the other party, the beauty the founders had was that the House would act in a more precipitous way and the Senate would be more measured. It was like the House was like a hot cup of coffee, and the Senate was supposed to be that you rested the coffee on, so it could cool off and have a moment, Chris.
The founders didn't put it in.
I'm just suggesting, no, but I'm going to suggest to you that the filibuster has been looked upon by people on both sides of the party as something that forces the parties to work together and not let the majority run rampant over the minority. That is why they were not going to blow this thing up, because there were two senators, including Joe Manchin, who's a guy that has got a lot of guts out of West Virginia, going to end up being one of the most powerful men in the United States Senate, said no way. That is not the way to make America go forward.
I'll take the argument, but Michael, you get the last word.
An audit. That's all. Meanwhile, big tech censorship continues as Twitter launched a new program today allowing any user to add a note to tweets they believe are false in order to, quote, add context for other users. That's why I'm off Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I'm off them all. Better things to do. Senator Josh Hawley, whose upcoming book, The Tyranny of Big Tech, being published by Regnery after, well, it got canceled and he got canceled and blacklisted, is now available, by the way, for pre-order. I don't know if Amazon is even selling it, and it will be released on the 4th. Senator Hawley, thanks for joining us.
Time travel.
No. Inversion.
Impeachment trial during a pandemic. Let's use a word of the moment. It sucks. Pandemic should be everything. Why? Because we are nowhere on the part that matters most. Yes, we're ramping up how many vaccines get into arms, but we're nowhere clear to the rate that we need it to be. And by the way, the new administration doesn't even know how much ammunition they have, literally. Today, President Biden upped the vaccination goals. But let us just have a straight, clear-eyed sense of the state of play. I will give it to you. Next.
Hi, I'm a new customer and I want your best new smartphone deal.
Last question for you on the issue of what happened on January 6th. We have seen some interesting developments on the House side, where members of the House have described their fellow members as having led essentially what looked like reconnaissance tours for people who may have been among those who came back the next day or in following days and attacked the Capitol. There is a joint, I think there are 4 House committees doing a joint investigation, plus the Administration Committee doing its own investigation as to whether or not House members essentially assisted in the attack. Do you have any of those concerns about members of the Senate?
I haven't. Members of the Senate, at this point, none have been brought to my attention.
Okay.
I have great deals of concerns of how some of the members of the Senate behaved. I think the 7 people who voted the other way did a really bad thing, a despicable thing for our democracy. But I have no evidence of what happened, of what they're alleging happened in the House.
Do you support the call for an ethics investigation into Senator Cruz and Senator Hawley for their promotion of the idea that the election...
There must be consequences to what they do. I think we should first go forward with the impeachment trial and finish, and then move on to decide what the appropriate consequences are for them.
Listen, the First Amendment may protect the right of my Democrat colleagues to slander me and to lie, but it does not give them the right to try to abuse the power of the Senate to silence me and silence Senator Cruz and others. And I'm just not going to stand for it. I mean, if they think that I'm just going to roll over and say, oh, just go on ahead, abuse the Senate, tear down the Senate, tear down all of our democratic traditions, I am not going to stand for it. The people of Missouri sent me here to represent them. That's exactly what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to be intimidated by the liberal mob.
You know, where do you see this ultimately ending? I mean...
This is CNN, the most watched cable news network.
We're going on the trip of a lifetime. Scotland.
highways haven't. So you can drive from right here in Washington to Seattle and not worry about running out of juice. And at the same time, we give some real help to GM and Ford so they can become the electric car centers of the world, not China. All of it done with American labor. The amazing thing about this is twofold. One, it will take every no new internal combustion engines will be produced after 2030, and by 2040 there will be no internal combustion engines on the road. And guess who it has the support of? This is what's exciting. Obviously the environmental groups, from the most moderate to the most progressive. It has the support of the unions, because it's American labor. The UAW, the AFL-CIO, the IBEW are all in strong support, and it has the support of Ford and GM. So it has a broad coalition, and we think just about all of it, we're working on this, can go through reconciliation.
Meaning 50 votes plus one rather than needing 10 Republicans.
Correct.
Will that be...
Well, I think your book's going to be bigger than ever. You can thank all the people that criticized you for it, and hopefully they'll pay more attention to it, because this cancel culture, wokeness, whatever you want to call it, this effort to silence opposing views is real, and it's been going on college campuses against talk radio for many, many years, and now it's spun totally out of control.
It's the flaw of his inheritance. I'll say when things are this administration's fault. This isn't, because he just inherited a gap of information. The last administration didn't know how many shots we have.
You know, I would say one of the biggest problems right now is I can't tell you how much vaccine we have. And if I can't tell it to you, then I can't tell it to the governors, and I can't tell it to the state health officials. If they don't know how much vaccine they're getting, not just this week, but next week and the week after, they can't plan.
Do you remember how many times I had, hold that, how many times I had people in leadership capacity say to you, we don't know, they can't tell us? Do you remember? And I kept saying to you, not because I'm smart, but because I was talking to them before I had them on television. The administration didn't know. They didn't have anybody figuring it out because Trump didn't want to own it.
Look at it. You know, I have a lot of faith in that they'll make a good and right decision.
That sounds to me, in terms of the way you are thinking about that, I know you're thinking about a lot of different things at once, but it sounds like climate is central in terms of what you are trying to do.
It is central, and what I really like, I'm one of the sponsors of the Thrive Agenda. And the Thrive Agenda has combined three things, Eddie Markey and I. One is climate, bold climate legislation. Two, make sure it involves workers, training workers to build all the new clean stuff we need. One of the things that's always pained me is that so many working people think climate will leave them out when it actually will increase the number of good-paying jobs, as long as we make sure it's American jobs and good-paying jobs. And third, it also says communities of color who have been particularly left out and suffered most from climate should get some special consideration. It's a broad coalition, and it's the kind of thing that, yes, I care about. So in this case, climate is central, but jobs and dealing with racial inequities are sort of part of it. It's very good. I like it very much. It's the Thrive Agenda. Take a look.
Give me.
Confusion, memory problems, muscle pain or weakness, joint pain, flushing, or fever. These are not all the possible side effects.
On hand. Just like what happened with cases. Just like with what happened with tests. Just like with what happened in schools. He did the same things in Florida he saw Trump doing on the federal level. That kind of political shell game has to be what all of you stand up to, Florida, but all around the country, and say no more. That guy's gone. Take the game with him. When we are down to scrambling to find supplies for more efficient syringes, the good reason is if you have better syringes, you could boost the Pfizer supply by about maybe 20%. Every little bit helps, especially with Merck, you know, the big company, abandoning their bid to develop another vaccine. Look, the reality is we are in a race for our lives. This is about time. Time is of the essence. Vaccine versus variants. We know these new mutant versions of the virus are here. So we have to speed up the shots. As nice as it is to see cases dropping in 48 states, and they are, the CDC is already warning we could see rapid growth of different versions coming from the UK. Transparency, responsibility, accountability. We had none. Now we do.
And same with racial justice. A young man is arrested with a small amount of marijuana in his pocket. He has a criminal record the rest of his life, can't become a productive citizen. This one won't hire him, that one won't hire him. Change that. There's lots to do, and we have to succeed.
If I...
So I would say, and I left out the third, there are three prongs. One, climate with its concomitant parts. One, economic and racial inequality. The third is democracy. You know, the bill H.R. 1, we feel so strongly about it, Senate Democrats put it in as S1. And it deals with the infirmities in our democracy, getting rid of those horrible decisions like Shelby, which made it easier to block people's right to vote. In fact, automatic voter registration is part of it. Getting rid of Citizens United is part of it. That's a great bill. It has a lot of different parts. But those are the three stools: democracy, climate, economic, racial inequality.
Order at cardiomobile.com or Amazon.
When you can't watch, listen. Get the latest. Anytime, anywhere. Fox News Audio on Sirius XM. America is listening.
So just like clockwork, the self-righteous, the media mob, they cannot stop their predictable fawning. Yes, over the week, the frail and the cognitively struggling Joe Biden. Yes, media mob, I dare to say it again. By the way, pretty much a lot of people I know said it to me and asked me questions about it. You can watch my montage on Hannity.com. Now, for example, rather, than talk about the federal investigation, that is now a criminal investigation into zero-experience Hunter. No, the mob, they were giddy at an apparent trip. They stopped the presidential motorcade so Hunter can get bagels for people, and prompting the Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee to tweet, "This is the most coverage Hunter Biden has ever received by the media mob, the mainstream media. What a joke." There is an open criminal investigation into Hunter, but it gets worse as the New York Times is ramping up its worship of the ever-forgetful Joe, calling him, quote, one of the most religiously observant presidents in 50 years. And then there's, of course, creative ways to destroy what's left of the credibility of that so-called network he works at. The new Jen Psaki, the press person, promising to share accurate info. How refreshing. Oh, thank goodness, the thrill up his leg when Obama speaks or Biden speaks. Anyways, does that sound like objectivity or fawning to you? Does that sound like someone who's interested in fair, accurate coverage, or does it sound like more of the abusively biased, corrupt, fawning, fake news media industry